Imagine this. You're standing in a crowded room, surrounded by people laughing, talking, living. The music is loud, the lights are bright, everyone seems engaged. But as you look around, something feels off. You notice the way people check their phones mid-conversation, the way laughter sounds just a little too rehearsed, the way eyes seem to look through each other rather than at each other. And then it hits you, everyone here is performing, playing a role, going through the choreography of connection without actually connecting. And the most disturbing realization? You're doing it too. You leave the party early. You drive home in silence. And that silence feels heavier than it should. You sit on the edge of your bed, phone in hand, and start scrolling. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. An endless stream of people pretending their lives have meaning, perfectly filtered moments, inspirational quotes, highlight reels of happiness. You double tap a few posts, send some emojis, then close the apps feeling more alone than when you opened them. And in that moment, a thought creeps in that you've been avoiding for months, maybe years. What if none of this is real? What if I'm just pretending to care? In today's video, we are going to explore this question in depth. We will uncover how modern culture, technology, and even our own psychological structures have led us into a quiet crisis of meaning. We'll examine the thinkers who foresaw this transformation, and more importantly, we'll discover what can be done to rise above it. Stay until the very end, because the last revelation might completely change the way you see yourself and the world. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your participation helps us bring more deep and transformative content like this. What you are about to hear might challenge your beliefs, but it could also awaken a new understanding of who you are and what truly matters. This isn't a bad day. This is Tuesday. This is normal. This is the baseline emotional state of millions of people in the modern world. A strange, floating sensation of disconnection wrapped in the appearance of normalcy. We wake up, we work, we consume, we interact, we smile on cue. But underneath it all, there's a growing sense that we're actors who've forgotten we're in a play, performing for an audience that isn't watching, pursuing goals we don't actually want, maintaining relationships that don't actually nourish us. Welcome to the age of ambient nihilism. Not the dramatic Dostoevsky-style despair where someone cries out against the meaninglessness of existence. No, this is far more insidious. This is the quiet kind, the normalized kind, the kind that doesn't announce itself with existential crisis, but with a shrug, with a meme. With the phrase, "it is what it is," repeated so often, it becomes a mantra of surrender. This is nihilism dressed in casual clothes, speaking in ironic tones, hiding behind humor so dark it's become indistinguishable from genuine hopelessness. And here's what makes it so dangerous. We don't even recognize it as nihilism anymore. We call it being realistic, being chill, not taking things too seriously. We've rebranded meaninglessness as maturity, detachment as wisdom, and apathy as emotional intelligence. We've convinced ourselves that caring deeply about anything is naive, that sincerity is cringe, that hope is for children who haven't learned better yet. But let me ask you something. When did it become embarrassing to care? When did cynicism become the default mode of intelligence? When did we collectively agree that nothing really matters? And why does that agreement feel less like liberation and more like slow suffocation? Here's the paradox that should shake you awake. We live in the most connected era in human history, yet loneliness is an epidemic. We have access to all human knowledge, yet we've never been more confused about what's true. We have more freedom than our ancestors could have imagined, yet we feel more trapped than ever. We can customize everything about our lives, our careers, our identities, our beliefs, yet we feel like we're living someone else's life. We're drowning in choice but starving for direction. Overwhelmed with information but desperate for wisdom. Surrounded by people but profoundly, achingly alone. Something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. And the most terrifying part? We've become so numb to it that we barely notice anymore. This numbness isn't accidental. It's been building for generations, brick by brick, distraction by distraction, until we've constructed a prison so comfortable we don't realize we're trapped. The bars aren't made of steel, they're made of screens. of algorithms, of endless content designed to keep us engaged but never fulfilled. We're prisoners who've forgotten what freedom feels like, so we call our cage reality and convince ourselves this is just how life is. But what if it isn't? What if this creeping sense of meaninglessness isn't inevitable? What if the emptiness you feel isn't a personal failing but a rational response to an irrational world? What if your soul is rebelling, screaming at you to wake up, to stop performing, to stop scrolling, to stop pretending that any of this shallow existence resembles the depth of life you were meant to live? Friedrich Nietzsche warned us over a century ago. When you kill God, when you dismantle every structure of meaning humanity has built, you don't get freedom. You get the abyss. And the abyss doesn't destroy you dramatically. It hollows you out slowly, replacing substance with simulation, meaning with mechanism, being with seeming, and now we're here. Standing at the edge of that abyss, pretending it's a scenic overlook. Posting selfies while the ground crumbles beneath our feet. Laughing at memes about our own despair because facing it directly would be too overwhelming. We've become experts at looking away from the void while secretly knowing it's always there, waiting in every moment of silence, every pause between distractions. So here's the question that will haunt you long after you finish reading this. Are you truly living, or are you just elaborately distracting yourself from the fact that you're not? And if you're not living, if you're just existing, performing, going through motions, then who is? Who's writing the script you're following? Who decided what matters and what doesn't? And, most importantly, when did you agree to let them? The answer might terrify you, but it might also set you free. Nihilism didn't just appear overnight like some cultural virus. Its roots stretch back centuries, but it was in the modern era, the age of reason, science, and industrial progress, that it began to spread like a silent fog through the corridors of human consciousness. When Friedrich Nietzsche declared, "God is dead, and we have killed him," he wasn't speaking about the literal death of a deity. He was diagnosing something far more profound, the collapse of shared meaning. Humanity, he observed, had systematically dismantled the moral and spiritual structures that gave life purpose, direction, and coherence. And now we were left staring into the abyss, uncertain of what to believe, unsure of what to value, unmoored from everything that once anchored us to reality. Think about it. Your ancestors, whether 50 years ago or 500, found meaning through religion, through community, through tradition, through their connection to the natural world. Their lives were bound by rituals, by seasons, by sacred narratives that explained suffering and celebrated joy. Today, we seek meaning through consumption, through entertainment, through the endless digital stimulation that promises fulfillment but delivers only fleeting distraction. The result? A generation more connected than ever, yet profoundly alone. A society flooded with information but starving for wisdom. A world where we have everything except the one thing that matters most, a reason to care. Modern nihilism isn't the dramatic kind we read about in philosophy books, where tortured souls wrestle with cosmic meaninglessness in dimly lit rooms. It's far more subtle. It's the quiet resignation that whispers, "Nothing really matters," while you scroll through your phone. It's the apathy that keeps you consuming instead of creating, numbing instead of feeling, spectating instead of participating. It's despair hidden behind humor, behind irony, behind the endless distractions we use to avoid confronting the void inside. We've become masters of looking away from our own emptiness, experts at filling silence with noise. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the unspeakable horrors of Nazi concentration camps, observed something profound about human nature. He noticed that those who lost their sense of purpose were the first to give up, even when their physical circumstances were no worse than others. He wrote that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. If that was true even in the darkest conditions imaginable, what does it say about our world today? A world where comfort is abundant, where technology has eliminated most physical suffering, where we have more freedom and possibility than any generation before us yet. Meaning feels scarce, purpose feels elusive, and a quiet despair settles over everything like dust. Nihilism thrives where meaning decays. And meaning decays when everything becomes relative, when nothing is sacred, when the only value that remains is personal pleasure or individual preference. Modern society has replaced faith with algorithms that tell us what to think. We've replaced community with individualism that leaves us isolated. We've replaced depth with distraction that keeps us perpetually stimulated but never satisfied. Our gods are now screens. Our prayers are notifications. Our rituals are clicks and swipes. We worship at the altar of engagement metrics, dopamine hits, and viral content that disappears as quickly as it appears. But here's the question we must ask ourselves. Are we truly free without meaning? Or are we just slaves to our own emptiness, prisoners of a void we're too distracted to notice? Look around. How often do people pursue goals they secretly don't believe in? How many live for validation rather than conviction? We chase careers for prestige rather than purpose. We pursue relationships for comfort rather than connection. We seek pleasures for escape rather than joy. And yet, when the lights go out and silence returns, something inside us whispers that none of it feels real. That whisper is nihilism, and it's growing louder with each passing day. The philosopher Albert Camus tried to confront this crisis head-on. He argued that even if life has no ultimate meaning handed down from the heavens, we must rebel against the absurd by creating our own purpose. In his view, the struggle itself, the act of living consciously, of choosing meaning in a meaningless universe, is what gives life value. The meaning of life, he wrote, is whatever you ascribe to it. But in our age of passive consumption, how many people still have the strength to create meaning rather than simply consume it? How many have the courage to build something real when everything around them is designed to keep them distracted, pacified, numb? Perhaps that's the true tragedy of modern nihilism. It's not the dramatic despair of someone crying out against the void. It's the quiet indifference of someone who's stopped asking questions altogether. It's the slow erosion of significance in a world overflowing with everything except what matters. If you look closely, you'll see that nihilism has already woven itself into the very fabric of our culture. It's not an abstract philosophy locked inside dusty books or debated in university halls. It's alive in our movies, our music, our art, and most importantly, in the way we relate to one another. Modern culture celebrates detachment. We are told to not care too much, to go with the flow, to live for the moment without attachment. At first glance, it sounds liberating freedom from expectation, from judgment, from the weight of meaning itself. But behind that apparent freedom hides something darker, the quiet despair of a generation that no longer believes in anything beyond itself. Turn on the television or open social media and you'll see it everywhere. Irony replaces sincerity. Cynicism replaces hope. Humor has become a shield we use to mask our discomfort with reality. Memes and online jokes have become the language of our collective apathy, the way we laugh at our pain to avoid truly feeling it. When everything is reduced to a joke, when nothing can be taken seriously without being labeled cringe, then nothing matters anymore. We've created a culture where caring deeply about anything is embarrassing, where sincerity is weakness, where hope is naivety. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard warned of this very danger in the 19th century when he wrote about the despair of meaninglessness, a condition where people live in constant distraction to avoid facing the emptiness within. He saw it coming long before smartphones and social media, before the attention economy turned our consciousness into a commodity. But this cultural nihilism didn't appear out of nowhere. It was born from a century of disillusionment, 2 world wars that shattered our faith in progress, political corruption that destroyed our trust in institutions, economic crises that revealed the fragility of the systems we depend on, the collapse of traditional belief systems that once provided structure, meaning, and direction. We entered a new era, one that promised liberation through science, technology, and reason. Yet that very liberation also dismantled the comforting illusions that once gave life structure. The modern human became a wanderer free, yes, but lost in a world without direction, without maps, without any destination worth reaching. And that loss of direction seeps into everything. It's in the art that glorifies chaos and despair, the music that celebrates numbness and detachment, the advertisements that sell happiness but deliver only temporary satisfaction, followed by deeper emptiness. We are told to be ourselves, but no one tells us what that means when the self is constantly shifting, performing, adapting to whatever algorithm is watching. We are told to follow our dreams, but most people don't even know what those dreams are anymore, or whether they're truly their own dreams, or just borrowed desires from influencers and advertisements. When every path seems equally meaningless, the only thing left to worship is the self. And yet even that self feels unstable, constantly fragmenting under the weight of social comparison and digital performance. The psychiatrist Carl Jung believed that the human soul cannot survive without a sense of meaning, without a connection to something greater than the ego. When society loses its myths, its symbols, its higher ideals, the unconscious compensates through anxiety, depression, and inner chaos. Jung warned that if we don't find new meaning to replace the old, the void would consume us from within. Today, we see his prediction fulfilled in real time. Rates of loneliness, mental illness, and existential anxiety are skyrocketing, especially among younger generations. We are living in what Jung might have called a collective dark night of the soul, a spiritual crisis masquerading as a mental health epidemic. Ask yourself, how often do you see people who seem alive on the outside but empty inside? Smiling for the camera, chasing trends, accumulating experiences and possessions, living fast and loud. But behind those carefully curated filters, there's a quiet hunger for something real, something substantial, something that actually matters. Have you ever felt that too? That faint, unspoken sense that something essential is missing, though you can't quite name it? That's the silent echo of meaning calling out from the depths of the soul, trying to break through the noise. Philosophically, nihilism is not just the belief that life lacks meaning. It's the logical consequence of a society that treats everything as material, measurable, and transactional. When money becomes the only language that matters and pleasure, the only pursuit worth chasing, everything sacred turns into a commodity. Even love becomes a contract negotiated through dating apps. Friendship becomes a collection of followers and connections. Self-worth becomes a number on a screen. Likes, views, subscribers. The sacred becomes superficial. The profound becomes performative. But here's the paradox that reveals the true nature of our condition. Deep down, we still crave meaning. Even those who claim not to believe in anything still yearn for something to believe in. The human heart cannot live in a vacuum. That's why when traditional sources of meaning fade, religion, community, family, tradition, we unconsciously replace them with new idols, fame, success, power, status, or even outrage and moral righteousness, which at least make us feel like we stand for something. In the absence of a spiritual compass, we worship whatever makes us feel something, anything, even if that feeling is anger or superiority. And yet, that feeling never lasts. The high fades, the meaning evaporates, and we're left searching again. Nihilism is not just an abstract idea floating in the philosophical ether. It lives quietly within us. It shapes the way we think, how we love, and how we see ourselves. Its presence can be subtle, a lack of motivation that we mistake for laziness, a sense of detachment we rationalize as maturity, or a quiet belief that nothing we do truly matters. We often misdiagnose these symptoms, treating them as personal failings, rather than recognizing them for what they truly are. The manifestations of a deeper crisis, a spiritual disconnection that leaves the modern individual wandering through life without an inner compass. In the past, people found meaning in belonging to a tribe, a faith, a family, or a cause greater than themselves. Today, individuality is glorified above all else, but that very freedom has come with a hidden cost. The philosopher Erich Fromm once wrote that when man becomes completely free from external authority, he must then take on the responsibility of creating his own meaning, and that, he said, is terrifying. Many people are not prepared for that responsibility. They are free but frightened. They have everything, yet feel nothing. They stand at the crossroads of infinite possibility and find themselves paralyzed by the weight of choice. You can see this quiet despair in everyday life if you know where to look. The worker who spends years climbing a corporate ladder only to reach the top and realize there's no fulfillment waiting there, just another empty achievement. The influencer who gains millions of followers but feels more isolated than ever, performing authenticity while losing touch with what authenticity even means. The student who studies relentlessly for a future they no longer believe in, chasing goals that were never truly theirs to begin with. These are not failures of ambition. They are symptoms of a deeper hunger, a hunger for meaning in a world that has forgotten how to nourish the soul. Carl Jung would have called this a loss of the self, that deep instinctual source of wisdom and purpose that connects us to something larger than our individual ego. When the individual no longer connects to their inner essence, the ego becomes inflated, lost in illusions of control and achievement. The outer world becomes everything: status, appearance, success, and the inner world fades into silence. But the unconscious never disappears. It only grows louder, manifesting through anxiety, restlessness, and depression. These are not signs of weakness. They are signals from the soul, urgent messages urging us to awaken before it's too late. Perhaps you felt this too, that quiet voice within asking, "What's the point?" It comes when life feels repetitive, when success feels hollow, when pleasure no longer satisfies. It is the whisper of nihilism, yes, but it is also something else, an invitation to stop sleepwalking, to stop performing, to stop pretending that the shallow existence you've been living resembles the depth of life you were meant to experience. Philosophers like Camus and Nietzsche both saw this collapse not as the end of meaning, but as a necessary test, a crucible through which humanity must pass to be reborn. Nietzsche believed that humanity had to endure the death of its false gods, moral, religious, or ideological, before it could give birth to a new, stronger spirit. He called those who could endure this transformation the Übermensch, the ones who could create their own values in the face of meaninglessness. Camus called this moment the absurd, the confrontation between our human need for meaning and the universe's indifference to that need. For him, the absurd was not to be feared, but embraced. To live without ultimate meaning and still choose to love, to act, to create, that was his rebellion against despair. And that is perhaps the most radical act in a nihilistic world: to care, to feel deeply even when nothing guarantees that it matters, to build even when everything seems temporary, to love even when loss is inevitable. Because meaning is not something we find lying around like a lost treasure. It's something we forge, moment by moment, through conscious living, through authentic choices, through the courage to create rather than consume. But here lies the challenge. Our society rewards distraction, not consciousness. We are taught to escape discomfort rather than confront it. The moment silence appears, we reach for our phones. The moment sadness rises, we seek stimulation, food, entertainment, shopping, anything to avoid feeling what we actually feel. Yet it is precisely in those moments of stillness, in the spaces between distractions, that meaning begins to form. Silence, solitude, even suffering, these are not our enemies. They are the raw materials of the soul's awakening, the fertile ground where authentic meaning takes root. Viktor Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, wrote that the greatest freedom of all is the freedom to choose one's attitude in any situation. Even in the most horrific conditions imaginable, the death camps where he lost everything, he discovered that those who held on to meaning, even something as simple as love, faith, or duty, could endure the unbearable. His lesson was clear and unshakable. Meaning is not given by life. It is created by how we respond to it. So what happens when an entire generation stops creating meaning and begins to drift through existence passively? We become spectators of our own lives. We watch others live through screens, through stories, through carefully curated illusions, while our own potential remains dormant, unused, forgotten. Nihilism thrives in passivity. It feeds on inaction, on the absence of choice. The moment we stop choosing, it chooses for us. And what it chooses is numbness, detachment, slow, spiritual death. If nihilism is the shadow of our age, then the task before us is not to destroy it, but to understand what it is trying to teach us. Every great transformation in human consciousness begins with a collapse, the death of old values, the disintegration of beliefs we once held sacred, the silence that follows when meaning disappears. And in that silence, if we have the courage to listen, something sacred waits to be born. To overcome nihilism, we must first face it without fear. We must dare to look into the void and not run away. The void is not our enemy. It is the mirror in which we finally see ourselves, without illusions, without the masks we wear for others, without the stories we tell ourselves to feel safe. It strips away what is false, the borrowed beliefs, the artificial goals, the identities we've constructed from other people's expectations, and forces us to confront the question that no one else can answer for us. What gives your life meaning? The answer will not come from society. It will not come from religion, though religion may guide you toward it. It will not come from technology, though technology may connect you to others on the same journey. The answer will come from within, from the part of you that refuses to give up even when nothing makes sense, from the part of you that still feels wonder when you watch a sunrise, that still feels moved by beauty, that still yearns for connection, for purpose, for something transcendent. Nietzsche called this inner force, the will to power, not in the sense of domination over others, but as the deep, primal drive to affirm life, to say yes even to suffering, to chaos, to uncertainty. When you can say yes to existence, even in its absurdity, even in its pain, nihilism loses its power over you. You become the creator of your own meaning, the author of your own story, the architect of your own values. This is not arrogance. This is radical responsibility. This is the burden and the privilege of being truly human. The modern world teaches us to seek comfort above all else. But meaning is never born from comfort. It is born from struggle, from the decision to face pain consciously rather than escape it. Viktor Frankl reminded us that suffering, when accepted with purpose, ceases to be mere suffering. It becomes transformation. It becomes the crucible in which character is forged, where shallow existence is burned away and something deeper, truer emerges. And that is the hidden secret of nihilism. When we embrace the void instead of fearing it, it becomes fertile ground for new meaning to grow. Think of the artist who creates beauty in a broken world, knowing their work may never be seen by millions, yet creating anyway because the act itself is meaningful. Think of the parent who chooses love in uncertain times, who nurtures and protects even when the future seems dark, because that love is its own justification. Think of the thinker who questions when everyone else conforms, who seeks truth even when lies are more comfortable, because the pursuit of understanding matters more than the comfort of ignorance. These people are not escaping nihilism. They are transcending it through action, through choice, through the audacity to create meaning in a universe that offers none. Carl Jung believed that when the old gods die, the human psyche must give birth to new symbols, new myths that reflect our evolving consciousness. The modern world may have lost its connection to the divine as it was traditionally understood, but that doesn't mean the sacred has disappeared. It has simply moved inward. The temple is no longer a building of stone. It is the human soul. Each of us carries within us the potential to rediscover that sacred dimension of life, to reconnect with something greater than ourselves, whether we call it God, consciousness, nature, or simply the mysterious force that animates existence itself. So how do we begin this journey back to meaning? The first step is awareness. Pay attention to the moments when you feel that emptiness rising, not as something to fear or suppress, but as a signal. That emptiness is the invitation to go deeper. It is the doorway to authenticity. Ask yourself, what truly matters to me? What am I willing to suffer for? What gives me the sense that I am alive, not just existing, but actually living? The answers to those questions are the seeds of your personal meaning. They may be small at first, fragile, uncertain, but they are real, and they are yours. The second step is creation. Don't wait for meaning to appear like a gift from the universe. Create it through your actions, your choices, your relationships. Meaning grows wherever we invest our time and energy consciously. It may begin small, a daily ritual that grounds you, a creative project that expresses something true, an act of kindness that costs you something. But every authentic act pushes back against the tide of nihilism. Every moment of presence is a defiance of emptiness. Every choice made with intention is a rebellion against the passive drift of meaningless existence. And finally, the third step is connection. Nihilism isolates. It whispers that we are alone, that nothing connects us, that everyone is just atoms moving through a cold, indifferent universe. But the truth is, we are profoundly interconnected to one another, to nature, to the vast web of existence that pulses through everything. When you begin to see yourself not as a separate observer standing outside reality, but as a living part of this mysterious whole, life regains its depth. The sacred returns, not as dogma or doctrine, but as direct experience, as the felt sense of belonging to something infinite, Albert Camus once wrote that the only true philosophical question is whether life is worth living. His answer was yes, not because life is easy, not because it comes with guarantees, but because it is absurd, unpredictable, and yet somehow inexplicably beautiful. The struggle itself, he said, is enough to fill a man's heart. And perhaps that is the ultimate cure for nihilism, to embrace existence as it is imperfect, fleeting, often painful, yet profoundly meaningful when lived with awareness and love. So maybe nihilism is not the darkness that destroys us, but the night through which we must travel to find the dawn. It is the silence before the song, the pause before creation, the death before rebirth. The fact that we can even ask, what is the meaning of life? That we can yearn for it, seek it, feel its absence, proves that something within us already knows the answer. We are not meaningless creatures stumbling through a meaningless universe. We are meaning-making creatures, born with the capacity to transform emptiness into significance, chaos into beauty, despair into hope. The question now is, will you continue to drift through life numb and disconnected, or will you dare to awaken? Will you let the noise of the world drown out your inner voice, or will you begin to listen? Because meaning is not hidden from you. It is not locked away in ancient texts or reserved for the enlightened few. It is waiting in the very heart of your being, quietly asking to be remembered, to be lived, to be embodied in every choice you make. If you've stayed until now, perhaps you already feel it, that subtle spark of awareness, that stirring inside that whispers, there must be more. And there is. The journey doesn't end here. It begins with the decision to look within and create meaning, no matter what. To live not as a consumer of experiences, but as a creator of significance. To choose presence over distraction, depth over superficiality, love over fear. The final truth of nihilism is not that nothing matters, but that everything can matter if you choose to make it so. The universe may not care, but you do. And that caring, that capacity to create meaning in the face of meaninglessness, that refusal to surrender to the void, that is what makes you human. That is what makes life worth living. The abyss is real, but so are you. And in the end, which one you give power to is entirely your choice.